Uh-oh, Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. The judge just declared that you must unseal all your third-party communication. Could that be why Hugh Jackman is apparently ghosting Ryan Reynolds? Sorry, Blake and Ryan. Nope. You don't get special celebrity privileges. Nope. You must unseal all this stuff. The third-party communications, etc., which could mean Taylor Swift, Ryan Reynolds, all that stuff. It's all gonna come, and it's all coming Tuesday. It's subtle at first. A missed text here, a cold shoulder there. But those close to them can feel the tension. Hugh's been unusually quiet around Ryan lately. People are whispering he's stepping back for his own sanity.
Ryan Reynolds is visibly panicking, and the reason is straightforward. The protection he relied on has suddenly disappeared. A judge intervened and removed the layer of celebrity shielding, ordering the complete unsealing of third-party communications. With that decision, private texts, emails, and messages were pulled into the open, not only between the central figures involved, but also among agents, studios, and other outside contacts. Once the secrecy was gone, so was the control. Conversations that were once hidden behind closed doors are now exposed, revealing conduct that can no longer be carefully managed, spun for the public, or quietly kept out of sight.
Third-party privacy interests. Unseal. Look at all these third-party private. Unseal. Unsealing all the third-party privacy. Taylor's text, Ryan's text, all of that could fall into these issues. And this is all going to be in those motions for summary judgment.
The deadline wasn't vague or flexible. Everything had to be refiled by Wednesday at 1:00 p.m. Eastern, with public oral arguments set for Thursday. That tight schedule mattered because it left no time to spin the narrative, delay the process, or quietly reshape the story before it came into the open.
Because look, oral arguments in the Wayfarer party's motion for summary judgment and Lively's motion for spoliation sanctions is scheduled for next Thursday, January 22nd.
The immediate fallout was harsh, and from the outside, almost ironic. For the first time in years, Ryan Reynolds seemed to lose control of the narrative. Normally, he's the kind of person who gets ahead of the joke before it turns on him, carefully shaping his public image with clever tweets and self-aware humor. But that strategy stopped working the moment a judge made it clear that private actions could soon be read aloud in public. When texts and emails are unsealed, sarcasm offers no protection. Charm doesn't shield you either, and no amount of marketing can rewrite what's already been said behind closed doors.
Public has a right to attend that argument and to follow along based on the unredacted summary judgment and spoliation materials. That is, the extent continued sealing of the materials cannot be justified. Ba-bing, ba-bing, ba-bing.
Within 48 hours, the industry's reaction began to shift, and that's the crucial part. There was no wave of public support, no flood of loyalty posts on social media. Instead, people went quiet or quietly stepped back. Almost overnight, quiet tolerance turned into clear distance. That's how Hollywood really casts its vote, not through loud statements but through silence. Once the order came down, it was as if the phones suddenly stopped ringing. That's what a real meltdown often looks like. Not public shouting or dramatic scenes, but the sudden loss of the invisible protection that once kept consequences at a distance.
The fact that she's been trying to do this is so shady, that she thinks she's above everything. Oh, this person shouldn't be involved. Girl, you started all this. You knew what was going to happen.
Then came the moment that seemed to shake him the most. Hugh Jackman went completely quiet. No returned calls, no replies to messages, no joint appearances, and none of the usual playful back and forth that fans were used to seeing. Hugh simply stepped out of the picture. For anyone paying attention, the shift wasn't subtle. A planned public outing at Sutton Foster's cabaret went ahead, but Ryan was nowhere to be seen. Hugh arrived alone. That single image spoke louder than 1,000 gossip posts ever could.
But, darlings, grab your popcorn. Hollywood's ultimate bromance might be hitting a speed bump. Sources tell Rob, that Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, kings of red carpet selfies and snappy banner, are showing cracks behind those perfectly polished smiles. An insider whispered.
Insiders soon began saying what many had already suspected. Ryan was the one reaching out, making the calls, sending the texts, trying to set up plans and keep their usual routine going. But Hugh was pulling away, and it wasn't simply because he was busy. The reason being mentioned was legal risk, possible depositions, and ongoing litigation. Hugh reportedly didn't want to be anywhere near a situation where his name, private messages, or even casual remarks might end up quoted in a courtroom transcript.
He's texting, calling, even trying to set plans, but Hugh just hasn't been returning his calls. Case in point, the duo were set to catch Sutton Foster's cabaret together. That's his new partner. But Hugh went solo, leaving Ryan and the gang hanging. At the root of the drama, apparently it ties back to Ryan and Blake's ongoing legal battle with Justin Baldoni.
This mattered because Hugh Jackman wasn't just any friend, he was the safest kind of ally. Their brand-friendly bromance had been something studios loved to promote. Years of jokes, interviews, and mutual hype had turned their dynamic into marketing gold. But suddenly, that same relationship started to look like a liability. Hugh choosing to step back didn't appear emotional, it looked strategic. He read the situation, understood what unsealed evidence can do to people's reputations, and decided he didn't want to be pulled into it next. When the first major ally creates distance, others tend to pay attention. Hollywood certainly did. These shifts rarely go unnoticed. It was the first visible crack in the wall, and it didn't come from critics or lawyers. It came from someone who seemed to know exactly when it was time to step away.
We got to be on top of how the judge is asking these questions. What's he saying? What's the verdict going to be in this? And then there's talks of a settlement talk happening that same day, later that afternoon. So I'm going to be there. I'm flying out. I'm doing it. I bought the ticket. I will be there. So I will be there. Quarter Rand Opinion. Lauren's going to be there as well. So you're going to want to watch us live on Thursday as a report from the courtroom in the freezing Manhattan cold.
Then add Marvel to the equation, because that's where the pressure really multiplies. Marvel Studios reportedly began reassessing its internal exposure connected to Deadpool and Wolverine. And the word reassessing carries a lot of weight. It means closed-door meetings, legal consultations, and detailed risk evaluations. What was meant to be a triumphant return suddenly started to resemble a liability review. Hugh Jackman was no longer being discussed mainly in terms of promotion or press tour. Instead, conversations reportedly shifted toward the possibility of depositions. That's a dramatic change. One moment you're the beloved Wolverine, the next you're a name on a list of people lawyers might want to question. Meanwhile, Ryan Reynolds was said to be sidelined from future creative input discussions. Think about the irony there. The person who built his public persona around control, wit, and carefully crafted messaging suddenly isn't the one steering the ship anymore.
But they are buttoning up their whole case. They're being so much more professional now to ensure that it's all released the proper way in court. And so Tuesday, get excited. I think we're going to get some damning stuff on Tuesday against Blake Lively.
Project delays only made things worse. The overlap with the SAG strike had already slowed momentum, and the added layer of legal uncertainty made the situation even heavier. Studios dislike uncertainty, and they hate surprises even more. When a project carries unresolved legal complications, it stops being exciting and starts looking risky. What was supposed to be a victory lap for the MCU suddenly shifted into containment mode. It wasn't about expansion or celebration anymore. It became about damage control, cautious statements, and a series of quiet internal meetings. In a way, the irony wrote itself. Ryan had built his brand on being at the center of everything, the humor, the voice, the personality driving the moment. But now the spotlight felt different, almost clinical. Lawyers replaced marketers. Silence replaced the usual banter, and the meltdown wasn't loud or dramatic. It was procedural, scheduled, time-stamped, unfolding step by step in real time.
And she spent so much money, wasted so much time, harassed so many people to try to get to the point, and now it's all gonna come out. And I want to stress, look at this. Thursday, January 22nd, that's this Thursday, this week, the public has a right to attend that argument and to follow along based on the unredacted summary judgment and spoilation materials. Damn right!
This is where the situation stopped being amusing and started looking uncomfortable. Once the text surfaced, it became clear that Ryan wasn't just loosely involved. He appeared to be actively coordinating things. The newly unsealed communications suggested he was drafting messages for others to send, And these weren't casual suggestions or small edits. They looked more like complete scripts. Instead of simply sharing his own thoughts, the tone implied direction, outlining what should be said and when it should be said.
I'm on a shoot right now. Want me to call you after? Sure. Zero pressure. We can chat tomorrow. And sigh. Ugh, I'm sorry, Ryan. Working on his set was truly one of the worst days of my life, but it's survivable, and I'll help. Call me anytime tomorrow. Even she's not like making it sound that bad, that they just don't like him. I think that's really the vibe I get from a lot of it.
He attempted to script statements for agents, Sony executives, cast members, and even media outlets, which is astonishing because that's 4 entirely different groups, each with their own priorities. Yet somehow he expected them all to sound like the same furious diary entry. Full-throated apologies were demanded on rigid timelines, as if this were a hostage negotiation rather than a film-related dispute. Tuesday by this hour, today before the press, now or else. Fixation on timing is almost impressive, if it weren't so unhinged. What begins as persuasion quickly shifts into pressure, then slides straight into coercion. You can watch it escalate line by line, first a polite ask, then insistence, followed by rewrites and finally threats of consequences. This isn't leadership, it's panic masquerading as confidence. Meetings reportedly stretch to 5 hours at a time, which is extreme for adults who are supposed to be professionals. Raised voices were reported. Intimidation was alleged. By the time people left those rooms, they weren't convinced, they were stunned.
He is struggling. And we're learning this from the stuff we have seen unsealed of just how mean Ryan is behind the scenes to get his way. I'm disgusted by it. I gotta be honest. It is shameful. This dude needs like a mean rehab or something to like really get in touch. Like, you're out of touch, bro.
And here's the ironic part. This is the same guy who built a brand around being the laid-back, funny, nice guy, the one who winks at the camera. Behind closed doors, though, he was running marathon meetings, rewriting everyone's work and demanding emotional performances on command. That isn't charm. That's control issues with a press pass. These texts didn't just alter the story, they exposed the obsession. This is where the whispers of power abuse turn into a paper trail. Once the seal was lifted, WME, Sony Pictures, and multiple producers stopped going along quietly. They pushed back openly. Internal records reportedly show clear disagreement with Ryan's narrative and his tactics, and that distinction matters. It proves that the silence before wasn't agreement, it was containment.
You've protected my wife from so much and so often, and I'm protecting her, and in protecting her, you've also preserved the film and its ability to not only work commercially, but achieve a second and possibly better objective, giving voice to a vital issue affecting so many people. No matter what, you have a lifelong supply of admiration, respect, and friendship from me. If there's any way I can pay it forward anytime, say the word and I'll show up for you. Try me.
Sony executives later confirmed they were caught off guard and genuinely uncomfortable during key meetings. Not mild confusion, not simple creative disagreements, real discomfort. And that word keeps appearing for a reason. People weren't prepared for the tone, the length, or the intensity of what was happening. Third-party witnesses disputed the idea that everyone was on board. Several accounts directly contradicted the notion of universal support. That myth disappeared the moment the documents went public. For months, these objections had been hidden behind blacked-out sections and legal jargon. Once unsealed, they hit the public eye because context finally existed. You could see the pattern instead of isolated incidents. You could track how often people pushed back, resisted being told what to say, and were ignored. Ryan's entire strategy relied on the assumption that no one would ever see this side of the process. He counted on people giving in out of fatigue, choosing convenience over confrontation. That approach works until a judge lifts the veil. Hollywood is excellent at pretending nothing is happening, but once the documents are public, pretense becomes impossible.
He says here, look, he says that all parties who submitted the materials shall refile them in accordance with this order by Wednesday, the 21st of this week, that's in 2 days, by 1 p.m. Eastern. So that's 1 p.m. Boom. You can imagine.
What makes this especially brutal is that the pushback didn't come from outsiders. It came from his own ecosystem. His agency, the studio, the producers, the very people who usually protect stars from themselves. When those groups stop nodding along and start documenting everything, the game is over. This isn't cancellation. This is accountability moving at the speed of email. Hugh Jackman prioritizing self-preservation over loyalty is quietly the smartest move in the entire saga. His divorce announcement in September 2023 is now being reinterpreted in a completely different context. At the time, it was framed as a personal matter. Now, it sits on a timeline that overlaps with lawsuit escalations, production pauses, and mounting rumor pressure. That timing is no longer subtle.
Another insider chuckled, Ryan's jokes online are still sharp, but in private, he's visibly frustrated. Hugh's given him the cold shoulder. You can see this. This is why I believe this. In those interviews he does, you can see he is struggling. He is struggling.
September 2023 lands right at the peak of the chaos. Legal pressure mounting, filming complications piling up, and public speculation growing louder by the day. In that environment, Jackman's PR approach shifted. The dual branding faded, the joint jokes disappeared, and the focus turned inward solo. Protecting his own image became the priority, not managing shared damage control. What stands out most is that Jackman reportedly refused to take part in coordinated messaging. No drafting, no group statements, no, let's all say the same thing. That refusal wasn't accidental, it was a boundary. He understood the risks of letting someone else script your words during a legal storm. In that context, silence became the safest strategy.
What happened in that courtroom? Because this one feels important to me. This one feels important to me where I feel like we got to be on top of how the judge is asking these questions. What's he saying? What's the verdict going to be in this? And then there's talks of a settlement talk happening that same day, later that afternoon.
And in this case, silence speaks louder than anything Jackman could have said. Every missed call, every skipped appearance, every unanswered text sends the same clear message without creating a record for a transcript. He isn't fighting, defending, or explaining. He's simply stepping out of the blast radius. This is where loyalty is truly tested, not through public statements but through private risk. Jackman chose survival. He chose distance. And that choice highlights just how volatile the situation had become, when a decades-long friendship could turn into a legal liability. The smartest move was to walk away quietly. Meanwhile, Ryan is left doing what he does worst, talking too much, reaching too hard, trying to control people who have already decided to protect themselves. Jackman's silence isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. And the fact that it hurts this much reveals just how dependent Ryan had become on that alliance.
You're out of touch, bro. Just because you got all this money and clout and attention doesn't mean you're, above the law in a way. My God, dude. Hugh's giving him the cold shoulder. First they lost Taylor Swift, now Hugh Jackman too. One friend sighed to me, Hollywood loves a bromance, but even the best friendships can crack under the pressure.
Every move since then has reflected caution. No shared interviews, no playful exchanges, no joint damage control, just distance. That choice signals more than prudence. It reflects fear of subpoenas, transcripts, and deadlines. It also shows a collapse of trust. When survival instincts take over, friendships become optional and legal calculus dominates. At this stage, nothing about it is accidental or friendly. Once the unsealing order dropped, something in Ryan Reynolds visibly snapped, and it happened in public. Across platforms, his behavior grew erratic, not chaotic in a funny, entertaining way, but twitchy, reactive, and restless. This wasn't the calm, confident silence of someone letting lawyers handle things. It was the digital packing of someone who cannot tolerate losing control of the narrative. Posts went up faster, replies felt rushed, and timing became uneven. And when timing falters, humor is always the first casualty.
People magazine had the exclusive that Blake is hiring a, blah, 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 I can't say, a lawyer ahead of the trial. Actress has brought on Sigrid McCauley, known for representing Jeffrey's accusers, her legal fight with heads up towards trial.
Defensiveness quickly became the default tone. Every response read like it was written to preempt criticism rather than address the facts. Instead of letting the reality speak for itself, he tried to explain around it. Deflection followed close behind. When people questioned behavior, the reply was never about substance. It was always about misunderstandings, bad faith, or others being unfair. Over-explaining became the tell. When someone who once landed a joke in a single line starts writing paragraphs to justify a vibe, you know the wheels are wobbling. The humor stops landing. What once came across as self-aware now reads like a press release wearing a grin. Punchlines become shields. Sarcasm feels forced. The audience can tell the difference. Humor only works when it's optional. Here, it felt required. And required humor is just damage control in fancy lighting. People stopped laughing and started noticing, asking why he was trying so hard.
So many messages from Ryan Reynolds have finally been unredacted, and they give us a peek inside the mind of a man who is way more involved than he wants to let on.
A pattern emerged quickly. Narcissistic framing took over. Every issue bent inward, turning every problem into a story about how it affected him personally, how unfair it was, how much he had sacrificed. Then came victim reversal. Pushback became persecution. Criticism became cruelty. Accountability became harassment. Anyone who didn't immediately fall in line was cast as hostile or disloyal. Woven through all of it was an obsession with loyalty enforcement. Who is with me? Who stayed quiet? Who didn't defend me loudly enough? Who owes me support for past favors? This wasn't confidence, it was fear disguised as entitlement. It's the behavior of someone who treats loyalty as currency and panics when the balance drops. The nice guy mask couldn't survive documentary-level scrutiny. Screenshots don't care about tone. Timelines don't care about charm. Once communications were unsealed, the gap between public persona and private conduct became impossible to ignore. The smile no longer distracts. The wink no longer disarms. The carefully crafted persona collapses, not because people suddenly turned mean, but because the record exists.
It's true. I'm sure you can relate. There's a point where it's like, it's too much, where you always want to be there for your friends, but you can't just constantly trauma dump on them and then put them in the middle and have them side with you on all, sides of a battle you're facing alone.
Ryan Reynolds now faces a series of problems he can't joke his way out of. The first and most destabilizing is court-driven transparency. This isn't gossip, it's scheduled, time-stamped exposure, controlled by legal filings, orders, and public arguments. That level of scrutiny leaves no room for improvisation. You can't spin faster than a docket. Studio skepticism naturally follows. Studios don't emote, they assess. Once a star shifts from being an asset to a variable, the tone of meetings changes. Questions multiply, enthusiasm cools, and risk enters the room. Court-driven transparency forces studios to rethink proximity, because being close now carries real consequences.
This guy is genuinely touched in some very strange ways, like a melon baller lobotomy makes more sense than his self-propelled, malignant stupidity and revolting behavior. Yikes. I can imagine there's almost no aspect of this which has been easy for you to navigate, but you've stood up for what's right in a system which more often than not favors what's easy.
The collapse of friendships has already unfolded in real time. Hugh Jackman's exit from the blast radius didn't happen with theatrics, but it happened decisively. Silence replaced banter, distance replaced access. That choice alone sent a message through the industry louder than any public statement could. When a longtime ally quietly steps back, it signals to everyone else that the situation is no longer safe to engage with casually. Career recalibration isn't punishment, it's process. Less creative freedom, more oversight, fewer unchecked lanes. That's how the system responds when trust erodes. Marvel, agents, and studios pivoted from protection to distance because protection now looks like exposure. This isn't about spite, it's about managing liability. What began as private maneuvering ended as public exposure. And now there's no need to speculate. The documents exist, the timelines align, the reactions are visible. This isn't a rumor cycle that fades with the algorithm. It's a documented collapse, unfolding in real time, one filing, one silence, one recalibration at a time. From that point forward, everything around him tightened. Calls got shorter. Meetings got quieter. People who once laughed along now chose their words carefully. The shift was palpable because Hollywood doesn't announce exits, it performs them silently. Schedules change, availability vanishes, access dries up. What made this different was the speed. Within days, not months, the tone flipped. The same industry that once protected him began documenting distance structurally. Lawyers took the lead, publicists slowed responses, executives stopped offering reassurance. This isn't punishment, it's containment. And the pressure didn't come from headlines, it came from paper, court calendars, filing deadlines, and ordered disclosures. Those things strip away personality and replace it with facts. Facts don't care how funny or likable you are, they only care if the record matches the story. Every attempt to regain control only highlighted the imbalance. Over-explaining made things louder. Joking too fast made things colder. Silence would have helped, but silence requires confidence, and confidence was already gone. When control slips, people talk. When accountability arrives, talking backfires. What we're witnessing isn't a scandal spike, it's a system responding. Studios adjust risk. Agencies protect exposure. Colleagues calculate proximity. These shifts happen before any verdict, before any ruling, because reputational math always runs ahead of legal math. That's why this phase feels relentless. There's no villain monologue, no dramatic apology, no clean reset, just pressure, accumulation, and visibility. Once private behavior enters the public record, the process doesn't reverse. It only moves forward, step by step, with fewer places to hide. Each day tightens scrutiny, narrows options, drains allies, and turns confidence into calculation, exposure into consequence, and momentum into hesitation. With no relief anywhere,